I woke up one Tuesday morning and I did not recognize the life that I had built. I was 32, lying in my childhood bed, and I was just taking a moment to reflect on all aspects of my life. I was laid off from a job that I absolutely hated, and I don't even know why I stayed at that job as long as I did. I was on and off again with a boyfriend, and we were in this perpetual state of limbo, not getting anywhere close to marriage, which was what I wanted. And I was desperately trying to build a business because I told myself I'm an entrepreneur. But that business was somewhere between a dream and a liability. And I thought by now I would be on solid ground. I thought I would have a clear sense of direction of where I was going in my life and a clear sense of identity of who I was becoming. Yet everything felt like quicksand. And it wasn't just that I was untethered. It was the realization that this life that I created for myself, this map that I spent all my 20s building, no longer made sense. By 30, I thought I would be married to the love of my life. And I thought my sister would be around to see it. And I thought that I would have an income to match this lavish lifestyle that I set out for myself. And I also thought I would have a kid or two. But instead, I was looking at a cracked reflection of my reality. How many of you have ever felt this? This quiet ache that brews inside of you every time someone you know announces, I'm getting married, I got pregnant, I have a new business, I got a new car, I bought a new home. And you're genuinely happy for these people because you want to see them win too. But there's a part of your chest that tightens. And you say to yourself, I thought I would be further by now. This concept is a feeling that I've created, and it's called timeline grief. It is mourning the life you thought you would have by now, the version of your life that you thought was eventually going to show up. And we are redefining what it means to be an adult today. But the challenge is we're still measuring ourselves on timelines that don't even fit the world that we are building. So I just defined this concept, timeline grief. But you may ask, okay, so Chika, what does it look like? So timeline grief is when the woman you know, she comes to a baby shower and she's trying to crack a smile, but she's asking herself, when will her body cooperate with her? It's that person you know that has that amazing career and anybody would kill for it, but to them, it's draining them inside. And there's too much shame to start all over again. It's that person who deleted their Instagram for a third time this year because every time they log into that app and they see other people talk about their own wins, it leaves a bruise. It's also for any of you in the audience, maybe you confide in a coach, a therapist, or even your pastor, and you tell them, I thought I would be further by now. And I think it's important to know, I studied psychology, so I wanted to understand what is the data that supports this timeline grief. And what I found out is that 75% of people aged 25 to 33 have experienced a quarter in a life crisis. That's a lot of people. But also, we are all dealing with this collective reckoning, and we're all asking ourselves, do timelines even matter? And even further, this is the first generation where they're having all our major life milestones documented in real time on social media. And I think it's important to even compare our parents, right? Our parents in their 20s were getting married. And in our 30s, we're still going on first dates. Our parents were able to buy a home with a single income. With many of us, we have side jobs and side hustles just to pay for rent. And our parents had these lifelong careers. I know my mom, she's been at the same company since I was a child. But many of us in our 30s and 40s are on to our third reinvention. So you may ask, okay, Chika, how did we get here? How did we get to the point where we're mourning lives that we didn't even want? I'll tell you. It was the moment you were old enough to understand expectations. And with these expectations, you were handed an invisible contract. Be the fixer, be the achiever, be the responsible one. I know for me, the invisible contract I was handed was Ada, also known as the first daughter in the Igbo language. And so I had the responsibility of taking care of all my siblings. But for all of us women that are here today, we were handed the invisible contract of growing up in the girl boss movement, as well as all of us Nigerians here today, we were handed the invisible contract of not only do you have to succeed in your education, but you also have to succeed in your career. And we didn't get a chance just to grow up. We had to step into these roles. So if I go back to my own story, I wanted to go to medical school. Not necessarily because I wanted to be a doctor, because it was the surest path to prove to my family that I mattered. And my mom and dad, they sacrificed a lot in the 80s. They moved from Nigeria to America. So I told myself, well, the least I can do is become a doctor. Because all Nigerian families expect what? A doctor, a lawyer, or engineer. So I applied to university, and I got a full scholarship, and I also got into a great pre-med program, which is the Nigerian parent's dream. But I'm gonna tell you guys, I was miserable. And not necessarily because I wasn't good in pre-med. In fact, I was doing quite well, even though I hated organic chemistry. But it was because for the first time in my life, I realized I wasn't building a life of my own. And in fact, I was performing. I was giving the biggest, best performance of my life. It was a well-rehearsed script designed to earn the love, approval, and security of my family. And what that taught me was that achievement doesn't necessarily mean fulfillment. And success doesn't mean anything if you actually don't feel whole. And we've all been taught that if you work hard enough, and if you achieve enough, and if you're impressive enough, that you too will have that feeling of making it. But let me tell you what making it is. It's always moving. And the goalpost is consistently shifting. And the timelines are always extended. And then one day you're going to wake up feeling exhausted. And then you're going to be wondering why, with all these accomplishments you have underneath your belt, why don't you feel enough? And this is what performing does. It disconnects you from yourself. And one day you're going to wake up with the resume and the relationship and the life that looks perfect on paper, but yet you feel nothing inside. Or worse, you wake up feeling trapped. And the mirror cracks. And it shows you the gap of who you have become to who you actually are. But let me tell you what the crack reveals. It reveals that you're not broken, you're not left behind, but you have to be ready to begin again. So that moment for me was when I was finishing my time at Georgetown and I got offered a job opportunity to join a startup in Nigeria. It was a 60% pay cut, and I had to move to a country where I'm from, but I never lived in. So of course my family thought I was absolutely insane, and my friends didn't understand it either. And me, myself, I was also doubting the decision, but I knew deep down inside of myself that if I didn't make the move, and if I continued on this path that everyone expected of me, I would have completely lost myself. So I made the move. And the first 3 years of me living in Nigeria were the most difficult years of my life. Unfortunately, a few months of me living in Nigeria, I got a phone call that my sister had died. And the startup that I joined and I was part of was running out of cash. And I was nowhere close to any of my immediate family or friends or anything that felt familiar to me. And there were many nights where I was asking myself, did I make the biggest mistake of my life? But ironically, despite me being pushed to my limits, there was a day I woke up and I never felt more alive. And it wasn't because it was easy or it looked good. It was because I was finally building a life of my own. And what that taught me was that sometimes you have to have the courage to disappoint other people's expectations, to honor the truth of who you are becoming. And that decision I made to move to Nigeria was the most important and most pivotal decision of my life. And it didn't fix everything for me, but it showed me a path, a pattern, a way through. So now I want to present to you a 3-step framework that anybody can take, and what I took on my own personal journey to go from timeline grief to timeline freedom. So the first step is that you need to reset. You need to give yourself permission to grieve. You can't heal what you can't name. Timeline grief is real grief. It deserves its own acknowledgement. So I want you to take a moment and you're going to reflect on this question. What version of your life are you mourning? I don't want you to fix it. I don't want you to judge it. I just want you to name it. The life where you were supposed to be married at 25. The career that felt more certain. The body that cooperates on your timeline. The version of you where you thought you were going to have it all together. I want you to name it, you're going to grieve it, and let it go. Because you can't begin again until you release what's already gone. Now, the second part of this framework is you're going to reclaim. Who were you before the world named you? Now, when my sister died, I didn't just lose a very close family member. I lost my own timeline anchor. She was supposed to be at my wedding, hold my babies, and she was supposed to see a version of me that finally succeeded. And when she died, every future version of my life died with her. But grief has a very interesting way of stripping everything down to essentials. And in that stripping, I found a version of myself that was beneath achievement, timeline, and performance. I remember the girl who loved writing before her grades, who actually wanted to build things that mattered and not because they were impressive, who prioritized stories over status. Who were you before the world named you? Before you learned to perform for love, before achievement became your identity, before comparison stole your joy. That version of you is buried deep down inside of you, and it's far from gone, but you have to be ready to reclaim it. And then the final step is you have to be able to rebuild. And you have to build a life that feels like home. Now, the truth that nobody wants to tell you is you don't have to burn everything down in order for you to rebuild. But you have to build towards what's true. And what that looks like is saying no to opportunities that look impressive but feel hollow. Investing in relationships that help you evolve and not just to perform. Rebuilding your systems that honor your energy and not just your ambition. And finally, making sure you measure yourself not by just achievement, but actually alignment. And the interesting thing is, yes, I did not go on to medical school, but I feel like I built something of my own, something where it honored my own timeline. I get to talk about things that I care about. I get to talk about identity, reinvention. I get to talk about the African diaspora and the African culture. And no, none of it made sense on paper, but it feels like home. Timeline grief will find you. Maybe it already has. Maybe right now, at this exact moment, you're reflecting on the version of your life that you thought you were going to have. But I want to leave you with some words that I wish I was able to tell my 32-year-old self that was sitting in that childhood bedroom. Permission. Permission to grieve the timeline that didn't happen. Permission to release the identity that you have outgrown. Permission to begin again, not because you have failed, but because you have evolved. Timeline grief is going to find you. And I think the tragedy is that the mirror will crack. And that is not the tragedy. The tragedy is refusing to see what the crack reveals. And on the other side of that honest reflection is freedom. Timeline grief is real, and timeline freedom is real too. Give yourself the permission to begin again. Thank you.